We're just not going to talk about Blood and Fire. Hi everyone, my name is Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and today I'm coming to you with a brand new reading vlog. For September, I am a co-host for Pick Pongathon, which is a readathon hosted by Crystal from Bond Book Reviews that is based around her TBR game, Pick Pong. And I played the game and I got, I think 6 books, 5 or 6, I've now lost count. And I thought, why not do a reading vlog reading all the books that Pick Pongathon wanted me to read? Because to say that any of these were on my immediate TBR plans would be a complete lie. I did not plan on reading any of these books in September, but Pick Pong had other plans. And the first one was for the prompt TV movie adaptation, and I picked The Rule Against Murder by Louise Penny. This is the 4th book in the Armin Gamache series by Louise Penny and has been made into a TV series on Prime called Three Pines. It follows Armin Gamache, who is a detective. He is the chief detective for the Surrey de Quebec for their homicide division, and he solves murders, obviously, because that's his job. Most of the time, well, so far, in all 3 of the first 3 books, these books are set in a small Quebec village called Three Pines. I love these books. They have some Canadian feels. They go to Tim Hortons. If you know me, I love my Tim Hortons. They have cozy mystery vibes. Obviously, it's not technically a cozy mystery because he is actually a police officer, a detective. They definitely have the vibes of a cozy mystery. This is the 4th book in the series. What crime he has to solve, I don't know. So I'm gonna go start reading it and find out. So it's the same day and I have reached the 50% point in A Rule Against Murder. And in this book, Armin Gamache and his wife are at the hotel where I think they went away on their honeymoon. That's what it seems like. They go there every year. And it's kind of like a cottage, an inn, a very elegant inn, but it's still an inn in the Quebec, like, countryside. There's another family staying there. It looks like some sort of family reunion, and that's also happening at the hotel. So this is the first book in this series that is not set in Three Pines, and I'm going to get to my thoughts on that in a second. Let's just go into what's happening in the book first. They're there. 2 people that we do know from Three Pines show up because they are part of the family reunion. Claire and Peter, they are in this book. So there is a little bit of Three Pines in here, but just a very small amount. They show up to the family reunion. The family is there for, like I said, a family reunion and also to unveil a statue of their father. And the murder is that the statue falls on one of the guests at the hotel. I'm not going to go into who died because they did not die until 112 pages into this book. 112 pages. This was such a slow start that I was like, are we even going to have a mystery for Armin Gamache to solve? It takes forever to get there. This is such a slow start to this book. It was so slow. Anyway, now Armin Gamache is trying to solve the murder. He's brought in some of his detective friends, his colleagues, and they are trying to solve this murder. I miss Three Pines. Not the small town necessarily, but the small town feel and the characters of Three Pines. I miss Olivier and Gabri. I miss Ruth. Like, I miss so many of my favorite characters. And I think if you're going to set a series in a place for 3 books, you kind of have to stay there or at least bring the characters with you. You can't give me 3 books of characters I love and then don't give them to me in the 4th book because I love those characters and I'm missing them. If we were going to just leave those characters behind, I would have liked them to for just 1 book, the first book, and then have the next book having Armand meet new people and do this. Then you could have had this book, meeting new people and have it set in a new place. But because we've had 3 books of Three Pines, I'm very sad and missing my favorite characters in these books. A lot of my favorite characters are not here. And like I said, I've had 3 books of those characters. I love those characters. I know them very well. I know them as well as Armin Gamache. So at this point, I'm not loving this anywhere near as much as I've loved books in the previous books in the series. This one's just not going to be my favorite, I don't think. Maybe the second half will change my mind, But as of right now, this is definitely not my favorite in the series, which makes me so sad because I really have enjoyed books in the past in this series. I believe I've even given one 5 stars. Like, I've really enjoyed books in the past. And this one just isn't hitting for me like the others have. Like I said, I'm just missing this feel. The energy is different. It's just really different. And it's got me a bit disappointed. So I am interested to find out the conclusion of the murder. So I'm certainly going to continue. I'm not like that disappointed that I would not continue. And I probably will still continue the series just because maybe we go back to Three Pines. Maybe when this came out, everyone felt the way I did and the author went, okay, we're going back to Three Pines. I really hope the next book has some of my favorite characters in it. So I am going to hold out hope. Maybe they're in the second half of this book. Maybe I will see some of my favorite characters really soon. I hope so. I don't think that's what's coming, but I do still want to know, like, who killed who, you know? Like, I still want to know the answers to the questions. I'm going to go finish this and then I will let you know my final thoughts at the end. But unless it gets the vibes that I've come to expect from an Armin Gamache book and also some of my characters, I'm going to be continuing to be a little bit disappointed. Just ignore the really horrific looking shelves behind me. I'm in the middle of redoing my shelves. I am finished A Rule Against Murder, and I am going to give this 2 stars. It did not get better. I come to this series for the characters, and the fact that the characters that I have known and loved for 3 books were not here was a problem. And then they were replaced by the worst group of people that you could ever write in books. Like, this family had so many issues and was so dysfunctional and was just so awful. Ugh, I just didn't like anybody. I did not like anybody in this book except for Armin Gamache. He was like the only person I liked in this book. I just didn't enjoy my time with this book. The more I read it, the more I disliked it. And we ended up at a 2-star, which does break my heart because I do like this series. But I am going to continue and I'm going to give this series another try at some point with the next book. I own the next actually couple books in the series. So I'm not going to give up yet. I'm going to hope that this was just a one-off and that we go back to all our favorite characters in the next book. The next book that I am going to be reading in this vlog is my most anticipated release for the second half of this year. I have the NetGalley arc and it's In These Hallowed Halls. And it is a dark academia short story collection. I think there is 12 or 15 short stories in here by different dark academia authors writing dark academia stories. The reason I'm so excited about this is there is a short story in here by ML Rio, which is the second publication of this author since their first book, If We Were Villains. If We Were Villains is my favorite dark academia book of all time. So I need to read this to read the short story by the author. There are other authors in here that I am excited about, such as Olivia Blake. I love the Atlas Six, so like I'm happy to read a short story by that author as well. But the main reason I'm excited about this is ML Rio's short story. So I'm going to go read this short story collection. I always find it hard to really talk about short story collections because you're really reviewing like 12 or 15, however many short stories in it, different works. You can review it as a collective, but the stories are all like individual. Anyway, I will do my best to tell you what my favorite ones were, the ones I liked maybe less, my overall rating of the collection, etc., once I'm finished reading it. This one I'm doing for new author, because even though I have read authors in this story collection, there are authors in here that I obviously have not read. So when I got the prompt for Pick Pong new author, I threw this on because I want to read it before it comes out on September 12th. By the time you see this video, it will already be out. I want to read it before it comes out. So I finished In These Hallowed Halls, the Dark Academia anthology, yesterday. I actually had a really fun time with this series of short stories. I ended up giving it 4 stars. There was only about 2 stories that didn't really interest me. The rest of the 12 I really enjoyed and they all really stood up in the collection as a whole. There was a lot of different stories because with Dark Academia, you can kind of go thriller, you can kind of go horror, you can kind of go fantasy, and there was kind of a mix of all 3 genres of Dark Academia in this book, depending on what author was writing. And even the horror ones, I actually think those might have been my favorite. That might be a crazy take because I don't typically love horror, but there was a couple of horror short stories in here that I actually really had a great time reading. They weren't crazy. extreme horror. They were very horror light with a dark academia vibe. So maybe that's why I like them, but I did really enjoy them. Some of my favorite stories were the ones that were really different. We did have, your thriller stories where there was murder, there was money laundering, there was a supercomputer that had anxiety, which that one was pretty fun. That was a Livy Blake story, and that one's gonna stick with me for a bit. I had a pretty good time with that one as well. There was shapeshifters, and like I said, there was some horror as well, missing people. There was a little bit of everything, all set in that dark academia vein, and I really had a great time with it. There was some magic, thriller, horror, there was just a little bit of everything. There were only a couple of stories that weren't my favorite. Like I said, I think there was 2 out of the 12 that just didn't really hit for me, which is why it got a 4-star rating. But in general, I think the collection as a whole is really interesting. And if you like dark academia, I think you would really like this collection of short stories. It was a really good collection, in my opinion. For the next prompt that I will be doing for Pick Pongathon, I forgot to bring the book down because obviously I didn't have a physical copy of In These Hallowed Halls, so I forgot to bring down my physical copy of the next book. So I will just insert a picture here. And that was for matching initials. So I needed to find an author that had the same initials as me, and I went with Bella Mackie and How to Kill Your Family. This is a serial killer book, obviously based around someone killing people in their family. So I think this is a thriller with a somewhat satirical vibe, but I actually don't know that to be the case. I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll see as I get through. But if it is, I'm actually very excited for this. I know it's blurbed on the cover by Richard Osman, which writes the Thursday Murder Club, and I love that series, and it does have that satirical background to it. So I'm really hoping that's what this book is, because I do tend to like that kind of thriller mystery idea. So fingers crossed. So I have reached the 50% mark in How to Kill Your Family, and this is not really what I was expecting, but I'm still having a great time with it, so that's totally okay. In my head, there was going to be a lot more satire in this book, but it's definitely a lot darker than I thought. There is a lot of sarcasm in this book because our main character is sarcastic, but she's a dark book. It's dark. Anyway, this follows Grace. I don't know if I went over what this is yet, so I'm just gonna do it again. So this follows Grace. She's never known her father and was raised by her mother, but her father is a very rich man. He has a very rich family, a well-to-do family, and Grace was a product of an affair. Her mother becomes sick and asks him for assistance and help. He turns her down, and her mother ends up passing away. Grace finds out about this after her mother has passed away and is enraged by this and decides to systematically kill her family. So she is a serial killer, but we are meeting her after the fact. Grace is in prison when we meet Grace, but she is in prison for a crime she did not commit, even though we know she's a serial killer. So no one knows about the crime she did commit, and she's currently trying to get out of jail for the crimes that she's in jail for that she did not commit. So it's kind of a little bit different because we know she should be in prison, but not for what she's in there for. Anyway, she's in prison and she's trying to get out. Up until about 10 pages ago, I didn't know what crime she was in for, but I think I just discovered that at this moment in time. What we're seeing is Grace writing a journal in prison to kind of keep her from being bored. She's very bored. She doesn't like the other inmates. She kind of looks down on them. She thinks she's much better than everyone around her. So she's writing a journal and kind of telling us the story of how she killed her family. So at this point, I've seen a couple of the murders, and like I said, they are dark. It's a dark book, but I'm enjoying myself. I don't mind that it's dark because it is a serial killer book. So like I kind of went in expecting that. I was expecting it to be more satirical, like I said, but the sarcasm of our main character is brightening it, kind of. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're gonna go with it. And I am having a good time with the book. I'm interested to see more about the crime that Grace did not commit, more about the rest of the killings, because I believe there are more that I haven't heard from yet. And also kind of what the conclusion of this book is. Does Grace get out of prison? Does she get out of prison for the crime she didn't commit and then get arrested for the one she does? Like what is going to happen? I wanna know what happens to Grace. Grace is a really complex character, and we see kind of her villain origin story in this book. And it makes you kind of like feeling sad for Grace for what she went through, but also feeling like Grace is a serial killer. Like, you can't like this person, but like you're interested in her story. It's an interesting pull with this book, and I can't wait to see where we're going, because there's like multiple ways that I think this book could end. And I'm interested to see which way the author kind of goes, or if it goes in a way that I didn't foresee. So I have finished How to Kill Your Family, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. There was a moment in this book that I got a little bit confused with what Grace was telling us. It seemed to be like she was telling me kind of 2 different things. And then there was a moment where I thought the ending was going to be very anticlimactic, because I was not expecting this to be a twisty thriller, because it wasn't reading that way. Well, I was lulled into a sense of security. There was a twist in here that I did not see coming. It made that kind of lackluster ending that I saw coming a bit better. So we kept this at a 4-star rating. I actually really did like the ending. I think it worked with how flawed the main character was. And you kind of got to see every aspect of Grace in all of her different facets. And I think it worked really well for what this book was. At the end of the day, you're following a serial killer. So you kind of have to be okay with a darker version of events, because you're getting it from the killer's perspective. But there is a bit of somewhat sarcasm in here to somewhat lighten it. Somewhat. It's a darker book for sure. I can't really go into a lot of the things about the ending, but there was a point in this book where this was looking like a 3-star, and then it clicked with that twist, and I ended up kind of bumping it back up to a 4. So that's all I can really tell you about the end, because anything else would be spoilers. But I did really like Bella Mackey's writing style, so I would definitely pick up another book by this author again. I think the other books are dark as well. So now I even know to expect that, because like I said at the beginning, I kind of went in expecting this to be more satirical than it was, and it was a lot darker. There was a hint of sarcasm and wittiness to it, but it was still a darker book than I was anticipating it to be. And now I know that for the future, going into more works by this author, to kind of expect that. Totally okay with that. Doesn't bother me at all. But it's nice to kind of know that going into a book when you're going to be reading it. I kind of always love a serial killer book. It's something that always kind of fascinates me in a way, into the mind of someone who can do that. And this really gave me that insight, since we were hearing it from Grace's perspective. In a lot of serial killer books, you get it from, you know, people around, or even from the victim's perspective, or people attached to the victim, and or cops, etc. You get it from other people. But this book, we really got into Grace's head and saw a lot of her motivation for what she was doing. I think in a lot of ways, she kind of brushed over her motivations a little bit to make herself sound better, since she's like writing her story. In general, I found that insight kind of interesting. I would say it must be very hard as an author to put yourself in that mindset. It kind of made me think like, wow, it must be hard to kind of think that way. And it really just shows the creativity of the author to be able to write a character like Grace. Anyway, 4 stars, and we will be moving on to my last book for Pick Pongathon. You may have seen my TBR and you may go, Brittany, you still have 2 books on your Pick Pongathon TBR. How are you reading your last book? So come in for a little story. So I was supposed to read Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin this month, and frankly, it is the last week of the month and I still have not finished Game of Thrones. So there is no way that I will be finishing Dance of Dragons and reading Fire and Blood. So I'm just going to pretend that's not on the TBR, because for sanity's sake, I need to. It's just too big. It's not going to happen. So I'm not going to fully complete my Pick Pongathon TBR, which is sad, but it is what it is. But it's only 1 book, but I still have 1 more other book to finish, and that is The Fiancé Farce by Alexander Bellefleur. I have it upstairs. I forgot to bring down the physical copy with me, so we're just going to insert a picture in it. Next time, you'll see me holding a book. So anyway, this is a marriage of convenience, fake dating romance, and it's sapphic. Do we need to know anything else? I think not. Not anything else. So let's go in and read this book and see what's going on. So I have reached the 50% point in the fiancé farce, and I know more about what's going on. So in this book, we follow Gemma and Tansy. We start off at Tansy's cousin's wedding, someone in Tansy's family's wedding, and she is marrying someone that Tansy has kind of a past with, a bullying past, kind of a sordid past with. So Tansy has not been wanting to spend as much time with her family because now this person has come into her family. She would like to avoid that person. So she says that she can't come to family dinner because she is dating someone and that they're getting to know each other and going on a date. One of her family members, one day scrolling through Tansy's phone, finds a picture of a woman. It's actually a picture of a famous person who is on the cover of romance books named Gemma West. So Tansy runs a bookstore, which is how she kind of knew of Gemma and her book covers. And that person, when seeing the picture, assumes that it is Tansy's new girlfriend, and it kind of just snowballs from there. Fast forward to this wedding when who walks through the door but Gemma, because she is actually the cousin of the groom. Everyone in Tansy's family goes, "Your girlfriend's here." And Tansy is like, "Oh crap, this is a famous person that has no idea who I am." The family kind of rushes her over and is like, "Introduce us." And Gemma rolls with it. Gemma's like, "Okay, this is fine." But actually, she's my fiance. So Gemma ups the ante because Gemma's grandfather just died about a year ago, I think, in the book, has passed on the entire newspaper empire that he has built to Gemma. But in the inheritance, there is a clause that Gemma has to be married. And Gemma kind of goes, "If you're going to fake date me, I'm going to marry you because I need a wife." And that's how we start off this book. At this point in the book, both of our main characters have definitely realized that they have feelings for each other. And they're doing the fake engagement thing, even though the engagement is real, but not real, They are going to get married, so they're planning a wedding. They're planning different things. They just had an engagement party. They're doing the wedding things, but obviously they're not actually together. But like I said, they've sparked feelings. The one thing I love about this book already is the communication between the two. Tansy has a moment of overhearing something she wasn't meant to overhear. And instead of internalizing that for half the book and we don't discuss it, we discussed it in the next chapter and came to somewhat of a conclusion on that. And I just love when books in romance don't rely on miscommunication. I just love books when they communicate well. And in this book, I'm getting all of that great communication. I'm interested to know more about Gemma and the family, what's gonna happen. Obviously, I'm assuming we have a happily ever after. It is a romance. But I'm intrigued to kind of see how it wraps up in the second half of this book, because at this point, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. There's still a lot of people who are trying to kind of make this wedding not happen because her family does not really want Gemma to get this newspaper empire. They want it to go to someone else in the family. So they're trying to prove that this wedding is fake. And obviously Gemma and Tansy are trying to prove that it's real. And it's not really real, but like I said, they're sparking feelings. So it's a complicated situation and I'm interested to continue on. I have sprints this afternoon, so I'm hoping to actually finish it on sprints this afternoon. We'll see. I should be able to get a good amount done, if not completely finish. And then I will have finished my Pick Pongathon TBR, except for Blood and Fire. We're just not gonna talk about that. But that is my goal for this afternoon, is to get on sprints and finish the fiancé farce. So I have finished the fiancé farce and I ended up giving this 4 stars. I will say the writing of this book was my favorite thing about it. I did enjoy the story a lot. There's just so many great things about this story. I loved, like I said in my midway check-in, the communication between these characters. Anytime there was a conflict, there really was no delay in the two characters coming together and communicating about that conflict. And I just love that. I find in romance that's not always a given, and I love seeing it because it just shows that the conflict in a romance book does not necessarily have to be a conflict between our two love interests. It can be an external conflict, and it still is a great way to tell a story. In this book, a lot of the conflict is with Gemma's family. They don't think she should get this inheritance. It doesn't have to be this big third act breakup between our two couples. Not saying this book didn't have a third act breakup, because it did, but it handled the communication of it so well, and these characters just communicated so beautifully. And even when they were communicating their feelings, the author, Alexandra Bellifiore, just put it in the book in such a convincing way, and how it was written was so convincing and so honest and true that I actually even got kind of like teared up at that moment, because I was just feeling what these characters were feeling so starkly, because it was written so well. I really did enjoy this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and it was a great end to Pick Pongathon. But that is the end of Pick Pongathon. It is almost the last day of the month. I have 1 day left, so I finished this just in time. But thank you so much for watching. What was a book that you picked up because of Pick Pongathon and really, really enjoyed? I had a little bit of everything. We had 4 stars, we had 2 stars. We've been all over the place for our Pick Pongathon reads, but I've had a good time reading. Thank you so much, Crystal, for hosting this readathon. We wouldn't be here without you, so thank you so much. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.